Good
Welcome
afternoon.
to,
Go
oh,
ahead.
well, both welcome. Welcome to our Senior Concerns Seminar Series. I'm Martha Shapiro. I'm the Director of Programs at Senior Concerns, and I am very excited to introduce our speaker that is with us today, speaking about how to maintain your brain, keeping your brain healthy for life. I get asked questions about this all the time. I think it's on everybody's mind, so this is going to be really important for all of us to hear. Our speaker today is Dr. LaBelle, who recently retired from his private practice with Vascular Neurology of Southern California, UCLA Neurology, and his own practice, California Neurological Specialists, serving patients as one of the top neurologists in the Conejo Valley. He previously served as a clinical professor of neurology at the David Geffen School of Medicine in the UCLA Department of Neurology and was an adjunct faculty member of Loyola Marymount University. Over the course of his career, Dr. LaBelle has been a part of many organizations and contributed to numerous publications and presentations on neurology and brain health. And I think that's the most times I've said the word neurology in one sentence. I think I pronounced it correctly. So I'm so grateful that you're here with us today. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. LaBelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And please enjoy this seminar, and hopefully you'll have some questions afterwards. Have a lot of material, so I'm going to kind of go through a lot of it kind of quickly. But let me start with this, which is my main comment, that everything you need to know about brain health, you've actually learned in kindergarten, and you know it. So I'm just going to sharpen things up and give you some of the background on all of this. There are lots of books out there. I have pretty much assimilated all of this information. Most of the books basically say the same general information in different words, but there's no one book that's any better than any other. So that's out there. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about what normal brain functioning is, what's memory, what's failing memory, is it always dementia? And then most importantly, we're going to talk about things you can do to keep your brain healthy. So when we talk about cognition, it's not just about memory. The way we think, it has to do with, as I've listed here, attention, which is very important, learning, various forms of memory. We'll talk about that. Language and speech. Something called executive functions, which is really the front part of the brain, the prefrontal area, which is involved with goal setting and planning and strategizing and judgment. And if that part of the brain is damaged, all of these things or some of these things get impaired. Uh, Cognition is also related to visual spatial orientation, knowing where your hand is or your arm is or where the elevator is and things like that, and fine motor skills. When we talk about memory, it is a little complicated. We have sensory memory, which is recalling a smell, recalling a taste, recalling how something feels. So that's all sensory memory. We remember a certain perfume, we remember what cilantro smells like, et cetera, et cetera. There's also short-term memory, and there's long-term memory. Short-term memory also is broken down into various aspects. Immediate, when you just have a phone number that's just been given to you, you remember it, and then for sure, 2 minutes later, you forget it. That's immediate memory or working memory. And then there's various forms of long-term memory. Do you remember there's a memory in regards to what the capital of France is? You've learned that in school. There's memory about where you went to school, what you did. So there's different aspects of long-term memory. Uh, when there's impairments, typically it affects your short-term memory uh, until, let's say, the very end. Um, this is a little picture that shows the part of the brain that's very involved with memory called the hippocampus. There's one on each side. It's kind of right in the middle. If you drew a line from your nose straight back to the front of your ears, you would actually get the hippocampus on each side. Um, when we're talking about long-term memory, this is basically how things happen. Uh, Something has to be important to you. cause an emotional reaction, a smell, a sight, something like that. That goes into your immediate memory and in your short-term memory. And depending on what the situation is, it will fall into your long-term memory. If it has very little importance, for example, what you ate 3 days ago for lunch, not really so important. Unless it was you went to this incredible restaurant and you had the best whatever linguine you've ever had, then that formed a sensation, went into your short-term memory, and then it's more likely that you're going to uh, move it into your long-term memory. If it doesn't go into long-term memory, you can't pull it out. You can't recall it. So it's there, it's stored in there. And so that's what learning is all about, making something relevant, important to some aspect, and then it will turn into something that you could remember for a long time. Now, about aging. Well, basically, our brain is basically lots of wires and nerve connections, and those wires will gradually deteriorate as we get older. And that's why stored memory becomes weak and fragmented. And in fact, every time you remember a memory or, let's say, a situation that you had, uh, depending on what's going on in your current life, that kind of manipulates and changes the memory a little bit. So a story of what you did when you were 15 years old that you recounted when you were 20 and 25, now that you're 50, the story has changed somewhat. And again, if you've not thought about it for a long time, you start losing that information. And that's same with names. Now, when we talk about dementia, dementia is a general term for a progressive brain condition that affects memory and or communication, which means speaking and language, and or reasoning ability. I have here senility is a myth. That is to say, we don't even talk about the word senility anymore. You can be 100 years old and have a pretty good memory. So it is a myth that just because you get old, you become demented. I think the thought is more like just as you become older and there's wear and tear in other parts of your body, the same thing happens with your brain. You're not running as fast as you ran when you were 20 if you're 80 years old, but it doesn't mean that you can't run or you can't walk. So again, same kind of idea. When dementia is defined as acquiring or losing your various cognitive abilities, most commonly it's the memory that goes. Other depends on what kind of dementia you have, but most commonly after that, your language skills start falling off, making math mistakes, having poor judgment, problem-solving issues. Uh, Many people with dementia, as things go on, they'll have various neuropsychological problems, depression, anxiety, mute, sometimes agitation, sometimes delusions and hallucinations. Hallucinations are actually uh, more of auditory hallucinations, hearing things, hearing people speak to them, so to speak, as opposed to visual hallucinations. And delusions is as delusion is thinking that something has happened, but it's not really happened. Um, Seniors, and I'm one, over 55, their biggest fear is getting dementia, getting Alzheimer's disease. Now, just for clarification, dementia is a general category. It's just like headache or back pain. There's different kinds of dementia. Most commonly is Alzheimer's, and as I have here on the graph, 60 to 70% of the time people have Alzheimer's dementia. Second most commonly really is vascular dementia, which means that someone's had lots of little strokes to where there's damage through different parts of the brain and therefore dementia. And that's the difference that in that is that Alzheimer's is slowly progressive, vascular dementia, usually you get hit with several strokes or a big one, and your thinking has changed forever as opposed to a progressive thing. And 10 to 25% of the other causes of dementia are Parkinson's disease, and dementia comes on late in Parkinson's disease, or something called Lewy body dementia, where the dementia comes first, and later on people have Parkinsonian symptoms. In the United States, 1 out of 8 folks over 65 have Alzheimer's disease. Uh, After the age of 85, about half of people will have Alzheimer's disease, and it is very costly. And as the population is getting older, you see that there'll be more people with Alzheimer's disease. Now, you can have memory problems due to other causes, not just Alzheimer's disease. Just aging will make some changes. Various illnesses, repetitive head trauma, and you're all aware of various quarterbacks and football injuries where people have had memory loss. Various drugs, a lot of alcohol will cause problems. Certain medications temporarily will cause memory loss or sleepiness. There is an inherited aspect which can be tested. Maybe 10% of folks will have this inherited aspect. Basically, not to get too complicated, you have 2 chromosomes. If the apolipoprotein E4 gene is on one of the chromosomes, your risk is 10 to 15%. If it's on both of the chromosomes, the risk is up to 40% that you'll get dementia, which means 60% chance that you won't. Diabetes not in control will cause memory loss, smoking, hypertension. There's a whole long list of heart problems, various brain infections, certain brain malignancies. All these things are conditions that can cause memory loss. You can have memory loss because of many seizures that have caused damage, Parkinson's, MS, dehydration. There's a long list. The point of all of this is that if someone is actually having memory loss, they need a workup. Just because you're having memory problems does not mean that you are dementing. Other risks, episodes of hypoglycemia, which means if the sugar gets very low, or for that matter, if your sugar is very high for a long period of time. We also know that vitamin D, if it's too low, excuse me, can cause memory impairment. And so everybody should be on vitamin D if their vitamin D is less than about 50. Let's see. Yeah. Sleep is important. We know that 7 to 8 hours of sleep is necessary for the healing brain as well as your skin and your heart and your liver and all those things. In the brain, if you have excuse me, sleep deprivation, there's a product called amyloid beta that starts increasing, and it damages, it just happens to go to the hippocampus, which happens to be the memory site. So that's where sleep deprivation comes in. Now, the good part is that we have what's called a cognitive reserve. And since the late 90s, we've known that in the front part of the brain, we have cognitive reserve, which is another way of saying we have extra storage space. The article actually came out back in 2017 from Columbia that had proven this over and over again. And so this is a process that allows us to maintain the best function possible, even though we're getting older or even if we have Alzheimer's disease. It does not mean that it prevents Alzheimer's disease. It just means that it can slow things down. So we have a typical cognitive capacity. And then as we age, you can see the red line, we start losing some of our cognitive capacity. But if we are doing cognitive exercises, if we are doing physical exercises, if we are eating the right things, if we're getting enough sleep, then we form new brain cells and new connections. And so we can improve, not get back to normal, but we can improve our cognitive reserve. Some people have, let's say, more space than others. And so they could actually be losing some memory, but they're smarter or their cognitive abilities are already better. And so what they lost, let's say in memory, still is above the average person. But the bottom line is that the more you use your brain, the better chance you have of avoiding the symptoms of Alzheimer's. Now, long ago, maybe 40, 50 years ago, we did not know that brain cells can regrow. In fact, when I was in my residency, the word neuroplasticity or neurogenesis didn't even exist. And now there are huge conferences and journals on that subject matter. So the old thought is that, whatever damage or whatever happens to our brain, that's just the way it is. But we now know that there are structures in the brain that renew themselves. And this is just a little animation that shows, again, in the hippocampus, the memory area, and they actually stain some of these cells to where people were doing, in this case, a lot of exercise, and then they actually retested the brain, and they saw that there were new cells that were showing up in the hippocampus. Now, you're all familiar with the word stem cells, and stem cells can turn into any kind of cell. It's kind of like a cell, and depending on what you provide to it, what nutrition you provide to it, it can turn into a heart cell or a liver cell or a skin cell or a brain cell. And so that is the notion of how the brain is plastic. And so we know that our brain can still form new brain cells because of the stem cell aspect. And depending on how we modify it and what we do to it, it can change its structure and function. But you need to exercise. You need to manipulate and work with it. Now, so what are the things that are helpful? Well, on the left side are the promoters. So the things that will improve neuroplasticity or at least get it going: exercise, stimulating environments. Uh, what can I tell you? High socioeconomic status and education, which probably makes sense too. A mind diet, which we'll talk about. Antidepressants, not that you should take that if you're not depressed, but if you are depressed, which impairs your thinking and your attention, then relieving that can be helpful. Sometimes strokes and various injuries can cause some regrowth, but that's not what we advise. And various brain challenges. Things that are negative, unfortunately, aging, unfortunately, stress, sleep deprivation, barren environments, doing nothing, sitting home all day long and watching TV is a barren environment. Nutritional deficits, smoking, high blood pressure, diabetes mellitus, excess alcohol, those are all negatives that will prevent some of the growth. Now, and this I quote this from British Medical Journal last year: the association between healthy lifestyle and memory decline in older adults. They did a 10-year population study, and they worked with over 29,000 people, average age 72. Half of them were women, or 49% women, um, and they found that the decline of memory was slowest if they had a healthy diet, more importantly than even active cognitive activity, uh, physical exercise, active social contacts, having, people around that you were interacting with, being a non-smoker, and being a non-drinker. And so every article that comes out has these aspects to it, sometimes in a different sequence. A lot of them have exercise being number one, but again, it's all very important. So what can you do? Well, frequent cardiovascular exercise, performing daily mental calisthenics. We'll talk about all this. Practice healthy eating habits and develop social connections. As best as possible, have a stress-free environment. Today may not be the best day for stress-free after yesterday, but be that may. Maintaining an optimistic attitude, good sleep habits, and avoiding multitasking. Uh, we know that people over 65 normally have a worsening in their multitasking, and this in itself doesn't mean that they're dementing. So it is easier or better to do things in small chunks. If you have to build a chest or drawer, don't look at all of the information at the right away. do step A, then finish that, do step B. Don't do A, B, D. I'm going to try to do all of this at the same time. And that's same with your studying or your reading or anything like that. Attention starts faltering somewhat after the age of 65. So one has to be aware of that. Again, if you multitask, you're not paying attention to everything that you need to, and avoid distractions. So if you're trying to do something important, don't have the TV on or the radio at the same time. Now, exercise. We know that from studies that people between 20 and 60 are who are physically active are 3 times less likely to suffer from Alzheimer's disease. And anything that gets your heart moving is important. We also know now, and I don't think I have this in a slide, that what's called HIT, high intensity training, is even better for those that can do that. So that, for example, 1 minute of biking as fast as you can on your bike, and then 1 minute of just regular speed, and then 1 minute of biking as fast as you can, or for that matter, on a treadmill, running as fast as you can per minute. And you do each 10 times, so that's like 20 minutes. So we know that's the kind of the top of the exercise in regards to helping in prevention. But anything is better than nothing, and all things are helpful. So here's a study from 2020 in Australia. Almost 900 people were participating. They measured cardio respiratory fitness, and they found those who were fitter, that is, they were biking, they were running, they were walking. Their cognitive abilities, their memory, their executive function, and their motor skills were all better. So we know that exercise improves spatial learning, and that's because it brings in new brain cells, new stem cells into the hippocampus, which is the memory center. Exercise also increases blood flow to the brain, glucose to the brain, that is, say, sugar and energy to the brain. And there are been studies that those that are involved in fitness training, when they do MRI studies, let's say 6 months, 1 year, 2 years later, those that are very, very fit, they lay down more gray matter in the front of the brain and the temporal lobes, where memory is housing also, um, than someone who is not involved in fitness training. So those studies have all been done. Exercise increases something called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You don't have to remember that. But what that does is that protects the brain cells from dying, and it strengthens them. So your goal, at least 30 to 45 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise, such as walking briskly, cycling, or swimming at least 4 days a week. You do what you can. The best is interval training, alternating bursts of intense physical activity with periods of lighter exercise. You can always Google HIT or high intensity training for those that are fit enough to do that. Again, it's better than low intensity workouts, and cross training is the best. That is to say, don't do the same thing all the time. Study from 2021 in one of the main journals, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found that even if you had been sitting around a good part of your life, and you're now in your 60s, you can improve or increase the size of your hippocampus, the memory centers, which means brain cells are coming in, by up to 2% a year by just walking 3 times a week for 40 minutes. Because otherwise, by the natural aging of things, your hippocampus starts deteriorating by almost 1.5% a year. So I think that's very interesting and important information. Now, other things. Exercise, Tai Chi can help. There's been studies that show that mindfulness with Tai Chi can be effective cognitively, as well as physically. Now, we talk about brain exercises. Brain exercises can stimulate your attention, your concentration, your processing speed, your language, hand-eye coordination. Again, no, it's not going to prevent Alzheimer's disease, but it will help as much as possible. And admittedly, it's a little controversial. I've seen some studies that show it really makes a difference, other studies that show it doesn't make a difference. But I'm on the side to where cognitive making your brain works has got to help your brain work. So there's memory training, there's reasoning training, there's speed of processing training. There have been lots of articles that have shown that cognitive training will reduce dementia. Um, there have been, I think we're up to now 230 published studies showing that brain training works for normal middle-aged folks and seniors, but cognitive training does not prevent Alzheimer's disease. Um, so regularly involved with stimulating exercises, taking brain exercises, taking classes, gardening, volunteering. We often talk about learning a new language, a musical instrument. All of that will exercise the brain. There are hundreds of different games. Some you can see online, so you can purchase them, all of which are to focus your attention, improving your processing speed. But if you do any of these games, you want to not make it a task that's painful. It should be fun, if nothing else, and change it up. Um, and really the Oh yeah, there's even more now software companies that have put out all kinds of um, games, brain games and whatnot. Again, if it's fun, fine. If it's not too expensive, fine. Will it make a difference in your life to prevent you from getting dementia? No. So there's lots of other avenues as well. But like I said, long list of companies that can do this. Um, Now, the before I mention this, uh, I think the way to think about it is that you can be 90 years old and begin to learn how to play the guitar. So you're learning how to play the guitar and you learn where the chords are and where your fingers should be. And if you do this enough, your fingers will know, oh yeah, for a C, I need to have this kind of motion, for an A, this, a D, this, whatever. Well, what's really happening? You are laying down new pathways in your brain so that your fingers instantaneously know where to go for whatever chord you're trying to play. And that logically is the proof that um, you can be 90 years old, you could be 100 years old, and still lay down new synapses, new pathways in the brain. So, point taken. Now, there's lots of apps that you can even play on your phone. Some of them are free, some of them aren't free. These are some of the names: Elevate, Impulse, Lumosity, Peak, right versus left, Brain Dome. And so, they're fun if you're sitting around, so to speak. Some other training software, Happy Neuron, Daycom has one. These all cost things. So again, it all depends on your interest level, but just to note that there's software out there as well. So, but again, and psychologists will agree that the best thing you can do is learn a new language, take a new musical instrument, practice. Um, there's lots of games out there, crossword puzzles, Sudoku. The studies actually show that doing lots of crossword puzzles only improves your word ability. Doing Sudoku only improves your math, but really doesn't translate into anything else. In any case, so lots of activities to help with your brain. Now, if you are trying to remember something, some of the tricks for memory stimulation uh, include contacting old friends, talking about your past experiences, uh, recreating memories, listening to golden oldies music, looking through photo albums, yearbooks. That's will all stimulate your brain and begin to bring things that are in the long-term memory up front a little bit more. Um, sometimes engaging in as we call it, a trip down memory lane will make your brain start working. You start thinking about, I don't know, first day in college and who you met, or where your dorm was and how you got that, how you unpacked, whatever else. So these are things that begin to bring back your long-term memory forward, so to speak. And you can recall experiences you've had with people, and that's very refreshing as well. As far as doing exercises, there's a million things you can do to kind of make your brain work. You can count backwards from 50. You can count backwards from 100 or 200. You can name the months of the year backwards. So you can make up lots of stuff, state capitals, whatever else. Now, other things that are important for mental exercise is meditation. Most of us will shoot for 20 to 30 minutes of meditation. There's lots of YouTube videos or other things that you can read to learn how to meditate. But basically, it's a very important learned skill that's good for your brain. And then there's something called the Kundalini yoga exercise, which is also been studied to help calm your brain. And so what that is, and it translates into Kirtan Kriya, that's what it's called. And so what the exercise is basically is I'll show you. So you can see the word sa, ta, na, ma. And so when you say the word sa, you touch your forefinger and your thumb together, sa, ta, na, ma. And so what the whole yoga exercise is you say it loudly first, sa, ta, na, ma, and then you say it quieter, sa, ta, na, ma, and then you say it just in your head, and then you say it quieter, sa, ta, na, ma, and then regular voice, sa, ta, na, ma. So that's what the back and forth exercise is. It translates into truth is my identity. And actually, as you focus on that for a couple of minutes, it does kind of calm your mind. And that's actually been studied. So when you're making your brain work, what does it do? Well, you get more blood and oxygen to your brain. Once again, we talked about cell growth and stem cell growth. You're making more connections between brain cells. It's making your brain more efficient. And the blood and the oxygen is also clearing out the quote unquote toxins that may be in your brain that is always there, we're always having waste products of whatever body part we're working with, including the brain. Uh, Interestingly, there's research that shows that using your computer just for doing web searches an hour a day will help you process information, because you're, again, laying down new wires, new synaptic connections. There's one study that shows that playing Super Mario 64 increases your hippocampal gray matter. I've not played that, so I can't say anything other than there's a study that shows that. Now, switching gears, we understand that stress is not ideal. Sometimes you need stress to perform better, but excess stress is not good, because what happens is your cortisol level rises. And that can damage your hippocampus, again, the memory center. So stress and depression go hand in hand very often. The recommendation, of course, is either medication or psychotherapy or deep breathing or yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong or something to help reduce your stress. In certain situations, in the immediate situation, for reduction of stress, walking away if you can, being optimistic, putting a smile on your face. It's hard to feel stressed and angry if you force a smile on your face. Thinking of gratefulness. Thinking about if your problems are small or big. Working out regularly. Don't be alone. Talk to your friends, talk to your people, talk to your therapist if necessary, and then having relaxation responses. Again, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, any of those things to help reduce your stress. Positive attitude is important for brain health. We know, for example, that in conditions like multiple sclerosis, those that have a very positive attitude do much better than those that are, oh, woe is me, what's going to happen? Oh no, I can't live with this, blah, blah, blah. They have more attacks. They don't do as well. So positive attitude is important for brain health as well. Now, one of the interesting things that we've learned over time is regarding music therapy. And we learn that music is about the last, or remembering certain music is about the last thing that goes when someone is actually dementing. And we know that playing music that's familiar improves someone's mood and quality of life, decreases stress and anxiety. I'm sure all of you have experienced that, be it, listening to classical music or your favorite rock or whatever else, just to have nice background and calmness. And it turns out that the part of the frontal lobe and the medial, the inside part, is where music and memory and emotion are all tied up together. And as mentioned, it's the last part of the brain to atrophy, even in Alzheimer's disease. So there was one study that showed improvement in 45 patients who had dementia after 1 hour of listening to their favorite music 3 times a week for almost a year. And these folks were tested cognitively at the beginning of the study, 3 months later, 6 months later, 10 months later, and there was a significant improvement in their memory abilities. There was another study in Spain in 2013 that showed that listening to their favorite music 3 times a week for a couple of months improved their overall feeling, their mood, their body awareness. Um, and again, it was music that was familiar to them, that was pleasant to them. Uh, there's studies that show that it helps individuals' autobiographical memory. I'm sure that's true for any of you. Think of the first time you heard your favorite band and what you were doing or who you were with, etc. And that another study showed that it will remember your narrative memories. Again, you were at that concert, who were you with, what was the day like, all those sort of things that you don't think about until you're like, oh, that song throws me back into that experience. Um, basically the recommendations for what kind of music you should be listening to is related or studied from the Institute of Music and Neurological Function, and it has to do with the age group that you're in. So some folks were in their teenage years listening to Nat King Cole, others Dean Martin, other people Bob Dylan, and so it has to do with the decades that you were living in as to what your quote unquote favorite songs are. And these are general recommendations of familiarity regarding music. In regards to actual sound therapy to help concentration, studies have shown that Mozart's piano concerto, uh, December by George Winston, etc., just as written here. Some of the new age and classical pieces are the kind of sound therapy that is calming for folks and helps their attention. Change of discussion. Excuse me. This is regards to supplements. Gee, what should I be taking? This is not a comprehensive list of everything that you can find in the health food stores that uh, processes to improve your thinking. There are lots of things over the counter, Prevagen, Arriva, Sharp Mind Focus, Alpha Brain. There's tons of products out there. So how do you know if one's better than any other? You don't. Uh, there's no studies that show that one's better than the other. Um, it's all about advertising. Uh, things to know with supplements is that most of the herbal remedies, they're not regulated. There's limited quality control from brand to brand. So coenzyme Q from product A may be a different coenzyme Q from product B. There's no guarantee of effectiveness. The word natural is an advertising thought, just like organic. Because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe. There are many of these supplements that will interact with the medicines that some of you may be on and can cause bleeding and other issues. So it's important for you to tell your doctor what you're on, even with the supplements. And many of the products don't contain what they say they contain, and that's the sad part too. In regards to current research, this is the list. And again, I'm not pushing any of these things. The question is, gee, is there anything that's anybody's written that shows that they're possibly effective? Well, here's the list of possibly effective. And Dr. Ammon, I think, who has he's does a lot of seminars. This is actually the same list that he pushes, though I think he sells most of these. But all these are things that you can get in vitamin store. Vitamin E, acetyl L-carnitine, omega-3 fatty acid, Hyperzine A, which you got to be careful of if you're on certain other medicines, phosphatidylserine, vinpocetine, saffron, and choline. And in regards to the dosing, again, I'm not going to push any of these, but uh, omega-3 fatty acid, 1,000 to 2,000 units a day, phosphatidylserine, 200 milligrams, acetylcholine, carnitine, 250 to 2,000. So all these are theoretically helping the nerve cells, helping the wires, helping the chemicals involved. If it's really helping, unclear. Now, in regards to vitamins, again, that's controversial. There are studies that show that multivitamins don't do anything to anybody. There are other ones that show that they can help in certain situations. So it's very confusing. Um, when you're looking at multivitamins, it's best to avoid multivitamins that have excess iron or copper because that's not good for the brain. Uh, Vitamin C, 500 to 1,000 units a day. Vitamin E, 400 units, not more than that. Vitamin D, that's probably the one that's really important. Some studies are showing that your vitamin D level should be between 50 and 100. Um, Vitamin B6, if you take too much B6, usually more than 100 or 200 milligrams a day, it can start giving you numb feet. So, again, these are all things you need to take in perspective. B12, about 2,500 micrograms a day, but you need to have your B12 level checked because if it's low, that can cause memory problems. And folate, a milligram. And these are just some sites. The National Institute of Health has put out, there's a National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. You can put in, gee, this supplement, what does it do? Or is there any tests or research on it? This is a very good book in regards, again, I'm not pushing the book. I'm just saying when you're asking questions about what's the mind diet and what are we talking about, this is the information where you can get that. But you can also download information on the mind diet. That'll be in a couple of slides. We know in regards to brain diet that obesity will impair brain performance. We'll leave that at that. The information is that for every point in your BMI that's over what it should be, the risk of Alzheimer's disease increases by 36%, which is really frightening. There was a 4-year study that showed that people who had more than 25 grams of saturated fat daily had a 3 times increase of developing Alzheimer's disease. So again, a little frightening. Kaiser study showed that if your total cholesterol was over 250 and you weren't treating it, that you had a 50% higher risk of Alzheimer's disease within the next 30 years. And we know that high fat foods can increase beta amyloid plaquing in the brain. So that's the bottom line reason. So what do you do? Well, we know there's something called the MIND, M-I-N-D diet that can reduce the risk of at least or slowing down the risk of Alzheimer's disease. And the MIND diet is involved with 10 different healthy food groups to eat and 5 unhealthy food groups to avoid. So the MIND diet, the healthy ones, green leafy vegetables, 2 to 6 servings a week, a high intake of vegetables, legumes, fruits, and cereals. Unsaturated fatty acids, specifically olive oil, low intake of saturated fats, moderate high intake of fish, depending on where the fish are coming from, of course, because you got that whole mercury issue. Low to moderate intake of dairy products, mostly decreasing cheese and yogurt, milk. The thought is that increases inflammation everywhere in the body. Low intake of meat and poultry, and a glass of red wine daily with your meals. Avoid anything in the high saturated fat, beef, lamb, pork, butter, cheese, sausage. Avoid fried food. Avoid pastries and sweets. That theoretically less than 5 servings a week. Um, Foods that are good, leafy green vegetables, berries, cranberries, raspberries, blueberries, because they have a lot of what's called flavonoid content, which also protects the brain. So again, this is the Mind Diet. You can Google Mind Diet and it'll print out this information for you. Other things that are healthy, dark chocolate, yay. Drinking green tea. Foods that have a lot of lycopene, which is like tomato juice and V8 juice. Uh, you can take omega-3 fatty acid in pill form, or you can get it in plants and fishes. When you're looking at products, make sure that it doesn't have omega-6 fatty acid because that's bad for you. Um, so, Mind Diet, decreasing sugar and flour, avoiding trans fats. I think most of the time, all the products right now are processed foods say they don't have trans fats in it. Minimal animal fat, saturated fat, uh, avoiding things that have a lot of sugar in it, bringing in things that have a lot of fiber, and again, fruits, vegetables, and legumes. Uh, Try to avoid aluminum, which you'll find in Amphagel, then the antacid or baking powder. You know, you go through this so many times and you find, finally a spelling mistake. Various antiperspirants can have aluminum and it's absorbed through your skin. It's hard to get an aluminum pot anymore. Most of those are off the market. Now, there's always controversy about statins to lower your cholesterol. Most importantly, is that elevated cholesterol is bad for your heart and bad for your brain. So, if you can't lower your cholesterol with exercise and diet, which is really difficult to do if it's high, you need to take a statin. And statins will have neuroprotective effects. Uh, it's kind of controversial about if there's any increase in dementia on certain statins. At the very most, the newer ones, and I have it listed, atorvastatin, which is Crestor, and fluvastatin and rosuvastatin, are. I'm sorry, atorvastatin is Lipitor, rosuvastatin is a Crestor. Uh, they're a little bit, let's say, safer than the older ones, the simvastatin. Again, something to talk to your doctor about. Question about coffee. Well, it turns out that moderate coffee drinking is protective. And there was a study in Finland a couple of years ago, and they studied 1,500 Finnish, and those that were drinking a moderate amount of coffee had a 65% decrease in dementia. Their definition of moderate was 5 cups of coffee a day, which is amazing. So what can I tell you? Um, Black tea, green tea is also helpful, and there seems to be a reduction both in the coffee and in the tea with stroke. All right, social connections. Well, you don't want to be in a barren environment. You don't want to be isolated. You want to be involved with your community. You want to be doing things with friends. You want to have hobbies. You want to have social connections. That's all been shown to be very helpful for memory. So, the summary is you study hard, you have a good diet, you exercise a lot, and you get lots of rest, just like your parents told you. And that's why you learned what you learned in kindergarten. And thank you. And I think we have some time for questions.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I'm very happy about coffee and red wine because I enjoy both. And I actually play a lot of Super Mario Brothers with my son. So maybe I'm on the right track. Of course,
Great.
there's a few other things I could probably fix, but that's for another time. Let's see. Please feel free to type your questions into chat. The first question is, does it make a difference if you're drinking decaf coffee?
Well, the answer is all the studies were done with real coffee, not decaf coffee.
Mhm.
And the let's say the possible improvement is so minor that I really wouldn't worry about it. That is to say, not drinking coffee or drinking coffee is not going to be a major feature in preventing dementia, if that's what you're thinking. Again, what caffeine really does to a large extent is improves your attention. And it's actually working chemically in the brain. So if you're more focused and you can pay more attention, um, that's when your memory is going to be a little bit better. So if you say that, boy, when I have a cup of decaf coffee, it really helps me focus, uh, then it's helping you. If you say, I don't really notice a difference, then you got to try the real stuff.
Interesting. Okay, great. And then somebody's asking if they can have a copy of the slides.
Well, don't you have them? I mean,
Well,
I don't want,
the whole thing is recorded.
yeah.
If we can make a PDF copy of the slides, I can email those out to people as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I am, oh, right, I was just about to say that there's no other questions when one came in. I read recently that drinking wine is no longer good for you, even if it's only one glass a day. It also increases breast cancer risk. Thoughts
You
on
know,
that?
uh, those studies go back and forth continuously. So in regards to the wine, it's the red wine and it's the rovastatin that's rosteverol that's in it that makes a difference. There are studies that show that it helps. I know that there's studies that alcohol, it's not necessarily drinking wine, but alcohol itself can be bad for your liver and cancer risk and whatnot, for all types of cancer. So the answer is, if you're gonna drink wine anyway, drink a glass of red wine. If you're not a drinker, it's don't start now. If you have risk for cancers, again, you don't want to be smoking, you don't want to be drinking, et cetera, et cetera. So, but those studies are going to go back and forth. But if you really think about it, it's like, gee, why would alcohol really be all that good for me? Again, those are similar studies to coffee. Every couple of years, you'll see that coffee's bad for you, and then more studies will come out that it helps something else. Are there certain fish types that are preferable? Uh, yes. The uh, and it's on one of my slides actually. I should go back. I can't. Salmon. You don't want to do any bottom feeders, shark and things like that, because they bring in all the toxins.
Mm.
Um, Fish is really a problem in regards to the mercury content. I remember reading a study a couple of years ago that fish from the Great Lakes have enough, one fish has enough mercury in it for your whole year worth of toxin exposure. Um, so the answer is, and then there's a whole discussion about, is it farm raised versus wild, right? And I think it's the wild that's safer than farm raised. But so the answer is yes. But if you, like I said, Google mind diet, it'll specify a little bit more um, that the fish types.
Are shrimp considered bottom feeders? Are they bad?
Yeah, sorry.
At least I get my coffee.
Yeah, well,
Wow. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions at the moment. I will go ahead and send out the recorded copy as well as the slides. Thank you so much to Dr. LaBelle for joining us today and sharing all of this very helpful information. I will say that we are now planning for our seminar series for 2025. So when you get an email from me with the link to this recording, please feel free to hit reply and share with me any topics that you would like to see in our seminar series next year. Before we finish, last question, what about scallops? Are they
I have
good?
no idea.
I have no idea about scallops. Okay, something for us to Google, I guess. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. LaBelle. Thank you
My
to
pleasure.
everybody for joining us today. Stay safe out there. And I hope everybody has a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.